So this happened a little over 2 years ago. It was late 2016 and I just started my new job at a motel. It was low pay, but I needed an office job as it was required for my training. One of my friends, Michael, got me this job. For a few days I did training with the owner in the mornings, and for 2 nights Michael trained me. Our job was the 11 p.m. to 7 a.m. shift. Nothing too exciting, just checking guests in and doing paperwork. My boss, who is the owner, went away with his wife on vacation for a week, which is attributed to the swift training I had to endure. So it was my first night alone on the night shift. There was a monitor with security cameras around the motel's property and large glass windows all around the office building with a glass door, and there was no night window like most motels have. It was fairly early in the night, at about 1 a.m. I was just doing my normal paperwork when a man walks in and asks if we have any rooms available. Usually if someone is sketchy, my boss has me lie and say no, but he seemed normal at the moment. However, we just had a meeting on customer satisfaction and our boss was really encouraging us to be more polite to guests. Without hesitation, I said, yes, of course, just for one? And he replies, yes. So I begin creating the reservation on the computer when I notice he starts swatting in the air and making spitting noises, as if he were being surrounded by flies. I tried to ignore it, and as far as I was concerned, it wasn't my business, so I tried to check him into the room as quickly as possible. I give him his key, and he's on his way. At this point in time, I could be described as very timid and had a lot going on in my personal life, so I hope you could all understand my reaction to what happens next. The man comes back from his room and slams his hand on the glass door and causes me to jump. Absolutely frightened, I look up to see him just staring at me. He cracks the door and puts his head through and says, "I can't get into my room. Why won't you let me into my room?" My only defense is trying to be helpful, so I replied with, maybe there's something wrong with your key. Here, let me give you another one." The look he had in his eyes was inexplicable. I felt like I was in absolute danger. I handed him his new key and he went back to his room. I tried texting Michael because he was the one who trained me. Though it was in the middle of the night and he was asleep, I needed some guidance. With no reply from Michael, I noticed the man trudging down the stairs to come back and I go into absolute panic mode. I run into the back office and lock the door, and I pull out my pocket knife. It's important to keep protection when working at night. All the while, I hear the man in the office yelling, "Hello? Hello, why won't you let me into my room? Do you not like me?" Me being an absolute idiot and not standing my ground and calling the police when I'm feeling scared, I decide to take the situation on alone. I reply with, "I'm just on the phone, I'll be right out." I then start calling Michael over and over for help, but no answer. I decided to take a few deep breaths and then step out of the office. However, the man was not there, but rather in the bathroom. I start hearing him talking to himself saying, "Kill her, kill her, kill her." My heart sank. Still being an idiot and not calling the police, he comes out and I say, your key was broken. I'm sorry. Let me escort you to your room." He agrees, thankfully. I was wearing a long sleeve sweater, so with my arms down, I was able to hide my knife in my hand while holding it. I begin to walk outside and he seemed insistent to walk behind me. We begin making our way to the staircase and up towards his room. I was sweating from how nervous I was, cautiously looking behind me to make sure he wasn't going to make a move. He stops at a room, and I stop at his room a few doors down. I smile and I say, "Oh, that's the wrong room. This is your room," as it clearly said on the door. The whole time, he was going to someone else's room trying to open the door. I quickly ran back to the office and locked the door. The next guest I checked in was a police officer from a few towns away. I felt bad for him about the guy, but they seemed willing to keep an eye out and ear out. The next night, the man came back. but I had the doors locked and told him we were all booked up. I explained to my boss what happened when he got back from vacation. However, he didn't take me that seriously. I continued to work there on the night shift for the next year, where many other strange encounters happened. So, strange man, let's never meet again. If you ever feel uncomfortable, always call the police.
This happened to me back in 2018, when I was 16 years old, and it still gives me the chills whenever I think about it. I had just gotten this job at a grocery store called Shaw's in downtown Boston as a stock clerk. I would basically put items and canned goods on the shelves, and would check for expiration dates, etc. One night I was working the night shift, from 6 p.m. to 12 a.m., as I had to work overtime. It was around 9 p.m., and the store was practically dead, except for a few customers who were buying some last-minute items. I was stocking the shelves when I see a man in a black raincoat looking for something. Being the nice person I was, I said,
"Hi sir, can I help you?"
He immediately jerks his head up to me and starts walking over. He then says in a raspy voice, "Do you know where the bread is, sweetheart?" With me being a bit creeped out at this point, I direct him to aisle 4, which was where the bread was. "So Anna, what time do you get off work?" I told him that I was getting ready to leave in an hour, which of course was a lie. I mean, why would I tell him the truth? He then asked me for my number, to which I told him no, and that I wasn't allowed to give it out. He then asked me for my Instagram, and for whatever reason I actually gave it to him. And with that, he took off. 12 a.m. comes around, and I was getting ready to leave. And thankfully I see my mom is outside waiting for me. This is where things start to get crazy. I get home to see over 10 messages on my Instagram from the same guy, and one of them was a voice recording. I played the audio, and what he said sent shivers down my spine. "Hey Anna, I know you lied to me about getting off work. I was going to wait for you outside, and then lower you to my truck, and then rape you." I immediately blocked him, but decided not to tell my mom, fearing that I would be the one to get in trouble. I told my boss the next day, and he told me to let him know if anything else happens. Nothing has happened since, and I hope it stays that way.
To preface this, I worked the night shift at a small 24-hour gas station in a rural part of Oxford, Mississippi. I say rural as the area was mostly in the countryside of the state with not a lot of civilization. My town has a population of around 20,000 people, and while it may seem like a lot, the town was quiet for the most part with some small shops. Anyway, the gas station was located in one of the corners of the street where not a lot of people came to, meaning not a lot of people came into the gas station either. Sometimes you get a few people come in for a beer or a late night snack, but that was pretty much it. One night, I had to work overtime as the person who would come in after me had called in sick, meaning I would have to take his shift. Throughout the night, I would find myself tired behind the counter, scrolling through my phone and counting the minutes go by. 2 o'clock comes around and I'm bored out of my mind when I look to my right and notice a woman looking in the store from outside. She then comes inside and I say almost immediately, she started quietly talking to herself in a sort of low-key kind of way. I tried to make out what she was saying, and even though it was hard, I thought I could hear her talking about somebody named John. She grabbed a couple of beers and put them on the counter, not saying a word. I told her the price, and she then gave me a $10 bill and left with the beers. In fact, she didn't even ask for change back, or even a bag. Some time had passed, and I was playing some Sudoku on my iPhone when I looked to my left to see the same woman again out in the parking lot. By the looks of it, she didn't seem to have a car, and so I assumed that she walked here. But I was starting to feel uncomfortable now. All of a sudden, she starts to come back in the store and comes up to the front counter once again. She asks me in a raspy voice to come with her and that she needed help. At this point, I immediately knew that something was off, but me being the nice person I was, I went with her just to see what she wanted. She led me outside to the side of the gas station, and I then told her that if she needed help, I could let her use the phone inside. What happens next is something I would never forget. Come on, hon. I just want to show you something behind those dumpsters. The very moment she said that, I could have sworn I heard faint rustling noises coming from that direction. Her face then formed into a very unpleasant smile, and that's when I ran back inside to call the cops. She never came back, and when police arrived, they found nothing at the back of the station, and whoever the woman was long gone. I still have no idea as to what her intentions were, but I don't want to know who or what was behind the dumpster that night.
In 2008, I worked at a retail clothing store near a mall in San Francisco. It was one of the more popular malls in my city, even though it was located in an area that wasn't so great. There would sometimes be robberies, vehicle break-ins, kidnappings, and sirens would often be heard from time to time. Let's just say the cops came by multiple times a week. The clothing store I worked at was right next to the mall, and while we were near it, we were not associated with it, so the mall would close before we did. One night I was working the night shift, doing my nightly routine of checking the merchandise and placing everything in their correct spots if they were misplaced. Keep in mind, the store is completely dead, and there wasn't a single customer in sight, or anywhere around for that matter. So I'm behind the counter on my phone, scrolling through Facebook and whatnot, when the door opens. A man in his late 40s entered the store, wearing a torn white shirt and a pair of gym shorts. He was holding a beer in his hands and checking out the shirts. Now, our policy states that customers couldn't have alcohol in our store, so I politely tell him that he can't drink his beers in here. He turns around and faces me and gives me a, well, what are you gonna do about it kind of look. He then grabs a random shirt from the rack and puts it on the counter, and then tries to hand me a $5 bill. I tell him that the shirt costs more than that, and he replies in a raspy voice, "It's for my girl. Either take the money, or I'll take the shirt, and you can call the cops." By this point, it's obvious to me that this guy is completely wasted. But like I said, this area was known for these types of people, so it wasn't really that much of a surprise. I calmly tell him that he needs to pay the full amount. As soon as I said that, he pulls a gun from his back pocket. "Now you're gonna give me all the money that's in your register, or I won't hesitate to shoot you." I had never been in a more terrifying situation, so I hand him all the money that's in the register, and he takes out an old plastic bag from his pocket to put it in. By some miracle, I happened to see a police car driving by, and thankfully they stopped to see what was going on. 2 officers get out of the car, and they practically run inside the store yelling at the man to get down onto the ground. He gets down and they put him in handcuffs. Turns out, this guy had been wanted for various crimes, one of them being assault, and he thankfully was arrested. I still work there to this day, but nothing else like this has happened since.
A little over a year ago, I had a job working overnight at a gas station close to my house. I'm a female and I was 31 at the time of this story. I know, to some it seems unsafe for a woman to work the graveyard shift by herself. However, it was a slow store and the sheriff's office was only about 20 feet across from it, and I really didn't think I would have any problems. There would be about 30 customers in an 8-hour shift, and that was on the busier nights. And it was about 3:30 in the morning. I went outside to sweep the parking lot and last minute checked the trash. Since I was alone with nobody around, I decided to have a cigarette, and I had one headphone in jamming out to my music when something caught my eye. Across the road in the parking lot of the sheriff's office, I saw a figure with his back to me. He was swaying back and forth while looking down. Honestly, it looked like he was enjoying a much-needed piss, and I was wondering as to why he was doing it in front of the sheriff's office. By the back of his ripped white t-shirt, I remembered that he had come in about 4 hours earlier. He was a total creep, and I could already tell he had a good buzz going, so I didn't say anything. I just took my eyes off him and tried not to draw attention to myself. It was working until a car pulled in and I was still outside as they pulled up. I saw him look at the car and then at me back and forth again. As the customer was leaving, I walked her outside while I still had half a smoke burning, and that's when we both heard him start to swear angrily and seemingly engage in an argument with himself. She looked across the road and told me to be careful. I made an awkward joke about him being the one who should be more afraid of me or something like that. The man was still there, but closer to the road, now facing the parking lot of my store. He was obviously very drunk and could barely stand straight, still swaying away. I didn't engage him, but I didn't take my eyes off of him this time. I just slowly walked back into the store, but there was something about his face that really bothered me. It had a darkness to it, but his eyes looked wild. My experience during the graveyard jobs has always been the crazy-eyed ones and are the worst ones. I didn't like it at all and wanted no part of it. I still had almost 3 hours to go and 2 before any other employees got there. Instantly, I went to the computer and typed up a temporarily closed sign just in case he wanted trouble. Needless to say, I printed out and I'm coming around the counter on my way to the doors when I saw that he walked across the road and is now on my side. I just barely got the second door locked when he stumbled into our very small parking lot. I waved my hands in a sort of cutting way, basically saying we were closed. He thankfully started walking away, but then screamed something at me. I don't mean he was grumpy and shouted at me or yelled that I was an asshole or anything. I mean he was like at an enraged volume and was violently throwing his hands everywhere. Definitely knowing I'm in the wrong shift of the wrong job, I get really skeeved out, so I decided the best thing to do would be to call the cops. It's a good thing that I did too, because the minute I hung up with him, he comes up again to the door and starts pulling and banging on it. Our front doors are mostly made of glass, so I was terrified he would break it. He backs up and runs into it, trying to ram it. I yell out loud, "Go away! I've already called the police!" His anger thankfully decreased and walked away, but not without giving me an angry look. The police never found him, and they even drove around the road and surrounding neighborhoods for over an hour, but there was no luck. He was on foot, so I don't get where he could have gone to. He didn't harm me, and with them not finding him, I didn't fill out a police report or anything like that. I guess I was safe behind the glass doors that were locked for the rest of my shift.